Awesome. Okay, so today we are doing the art and science of teaching. Now we may be asking, well, how do art and science go together in teaching? The truth is it forms truth and depth. It forms a basis for the foundational concepts we learned. Art is, as we all know, the creativity, the side where it is that, what do I have here to work with and how can I work with it? Whereas science then, on the other hand, gives it a logical basis. And the two of these work together because you can have the best way to go about something. So let's say that you are going to make yourself a sandwich. You know that you're going to need bread or something to contain it. You need something to put on the bread. And then you're probably going to want to eat it over a plate so you don't make a mess. So you've got a basic outline for it. The art of it then is, how do I go about doing this? Am I going to toast my bread first? What bread do I have? Do I have bread? And if I don't, what else can I use? And it's these sort of elements where you get to be a lot more creative with it. And you kind of need the creativity to explore the possibilities. And then you need the actual basis of it for what needs to get done so that you can actually complete it in that regard. So, let's see. This is speaking about the merging of the two, obviously. And as we can see here, you want to ask yourself, what is art to me? Because the biggest thing in this is that you're wanting to expand your definition of what learning is and how it takes shape. Each person will have a different point that they start from, based on the different experiences they've had, people that have modeled for them, and it's learning how to see what you're wanting to do and what you are doing. And that's the simplicity that comes in science. So using proven methods, data-driven decisions, and this is where it is really wonderful because we can do research. We can look into what has worked and what continues to work. And once we start getting closer to those points, we start creating our own network. And we start realizing what we can do. And that's a very, very important thing to do. So yeah, you can stop the video and ask yourself, what do I feel about art, think about art, and what do I think about science? Just to kind of give yourself these points just to see where you are. And you can do it now at the start of this, and then you can also do it in a month, in a year, and you can kind of see how your own viewpoint changes over time. And it's a really interesting tool to see how you are changing, because when we're living, we're not really realizing that we're changing. There's a lot of change changing all the time, but just because you're not realizing that change is happening, it doesn't mean that change isn't happening. Change is always happening. So beginning to see what your changes are and how they look and how they take place gives you a bit of motivation and inspiration. The importance with this is that you're wanting to use both, essentially. This can always be looked into further, but an addendum to this would be an additional piece of information is that if we're looking at it from an art point of view, then that's what we call right brain thinking. It's the right hemisphere of your brain, which is largely deals with creative thinking, and it's that sort of thing of where a lot of left brain thinking, thinking inside the box. So when you're thinking artfully, you're starting to go ahead and think beyond your own scope, and that's where it is things like local relevance. You're wanting to make sure that if you're a teacher in South Africa, that you're aware of the South African concept, even within your own communities, because it's a case of if you teach too much for one culture or as one culture, then you actually lose a lot of what is South Africa, which is all of us together. The practical skills that are required for this, because if you're teaching kids how to only play, let's say, inside, but then they're in a rural area, then they're not particularly equipped for most of their own lives and own times and spaces. So it's that sort of benefit and balance of knowing what can help people, because when you're teaching people, you're really just giving them tools, and you can't truthfully give anyone tools. That's one of the most amazing things. Is no teacher can give you the learning. It's for you to take on and to independently apply within your own life, so that you can ultimately then know what it is that you're doing and how it is that you're doing. And this thing really is something called enhanced learning. So the more that a person, that you are able to look at different things and craft the words and the PowerPoints and all of this in ways that can help that individual, the better it is. And that's something that we'll get into shortly, which is participatory learning. And before that, let's look at the components of teaching and the learning situation. Now, this is a very wonderful quote. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. And here, I want you to take a moment and to think about your own learning experiences. Just take a moment, pause the video, but the question is, what teachers stand out to you? Because I know for me, I had maybe a handful of teachers. Like there's one English teacher that like really comes to mind, and then like a science teacher that I had for 1 year. And like it was these people that like I just wanted to learn, and it didn't even look conventional. I mean, in the English teacher, I didn't exactly like. I wasn't like at the front of the class. I wasn't even really paying attention, so to speak. But I was enamored with the learning, and it was like this otherworldly thing where it's not like I'm being filled up, but like I'm like just alive, and it's this fire that's lit, and that's where it's a case of we don't know who we have that opportunity for, or who has it for us, but it's important for us to recognize that opportunity, and that's in all situations. The big thing here is the teaching and the learning situations to know it's not just for a classroom. It really goes so much more than a classroom, because when you're just sitting down, yeah, it's easy to think, okay, this is where we're doing it. This is where we are having this class. But really, that class is just preparing you for every other moment you're ever going to have, just like every other moment is preparing you for that class. And it's then a case of starting to see all of these as continual pieces of development, because as you all are choosing to be educators and facilitators, there's a certain level of essentially responsibility, because now you might not have the skills, but you have the tools and are slowly equipping yourselves with the tools to ultimately be able to facilitate the learning process in all individuals, young, old, everyone. It's kind of universal. And there's a certain interesting thing where at certain points all of these pieces, you hold many of them. So we look at the learning environment of classroom. This can be, your home environment. This can be any environment. This can be your own internal space. We have things like meditation and even different pieces of medicine work and like very, very many different cultural happenings. And the truth of all of them is that there's an environment that they're happening in. And that's then the learners that they're happening for. And now the best learning environment is tailored to the learner. It's taken the learner in mind and asked itself, according to the science of what we know and how people take information in, and like what it is that's good to have around them. Like, are there natural materials? Is there enough light? Is the sound reasonable that it's not too loud or too soft? And with all of these pieces, it's a case of, is it sufficient for that learner? And this is oftentimes leading to the outcome. You're wanting to kind of shape it so that if you're teaching kids about shapes and geometry and blocks and things like that, you want to have as much information around them with it as possible. And that doesn't need to be posters. It can be blocks, can be colors on the wall, and like you can slowly start linking all of these pieces together, because the more individual things that all connect together, so when you're using a block in that play, you're building a bigger shape, then you're connecting it to the bigger shape, and it's allowing them to discover it. And then as they start to create their own, like links is the best word for it, like connections with it, they will then start being able to create a link with that link. And that's a bit of a snowball effect. It makes the learning journey easier for them and also more enjoyable, because now it's not just this thing that they learn for no reason, it's now suddenly this useful tool that they've been able to apply. And that's then also linked to the learning content, because the content that they're learning through, you're wanting to ask themselves, okay, so I need to teach these kids how to make cookies. I had this, really, really grateful, I had this thing, I think I was in grade 1, and grade art, but like I was young, and we went and we made cookies. Or like we actually just decorated the cookies. I don't even think we made them, but it's one of those like pieces that stand out of like this was a really good lesson. And it's completely different to the rest of my education journey because it felt so fun and light and connected and completely different to a lot of the rest of it. So the learning content can shape that piece. And that obviously that worked for me, that specific thing. But that wouldn't have worked for everyone else. So when you're holding the classroom, it's learning what works for different learners and how to start putting all of them together. Because you can't, unfortunately, always appeal to all the learners, but you can learn how to appeal to their appealings so that you're holding a space enough for all of them. And that just comes with time. Okay, so teaching dynamics is then what we're speaking about when it is how are you going ahead and creating that interaction. Now, a lot of the times it comes through dialogue. I want to point out here, dialogue is not always just in spoken word. It also, a lot of the time, arises in body language. So a key thing, and this goes on next year in AST2, but it's an important thing to know, is that there are 7 main roles of a teacher. You don't need to know this now, I'm just bringing light to it because it's really, really important to kind of start being aware of is how many different hats a teacher fills. And that's a whole part of like learning how to read them and be present for them and hold space in that regard. And each person has their own style with that, but a lot of it comes down to being empathetic, empathic to them. So seeing them as an individual and asking what and who are they, and therefore what do they need. This, a lot of the time, you actually use your environment to gear them up for, so that you can say, okay, this is the environment that they're in. This is what it looks like. I saw, let's say, Tabu having an argument with Johnny. So maybe let's move them apart. They can be really good friends, but with them being next to one another all the time, they're a bit distracted. It's not working so well. Okay. And then you go ahead and you see how that affects your delivery in the class environment. Because if you're having to always micromanage people, it's going to impact your delivery, both for the learners, because now they have to hear someone be berated, be complained at, or controlled, and for you, because you need to now be the one to do that. So the key with the environment is having it work as seamlessly for you as possible. There are obviously at times limitations for what you can do in terms of resources that are available to use, space, a lot of different impactors. And the key there is just to do the best you can. The best you can is just to provide yourself the baseboard for your delivery to be done. Nothing ever needs to be perfect, it's a bit of a myth, but doing the best you can is a complete reality, and it's the best possible thing for you and everyone else. And also, always be willing to check in with other people, your peers especially, because while you may have a lecturer at this time, ultimately it's your peers and other individuals that have and are continuing to learn that are able to take other learnings or pieces of information that they have received and go further with it. And it's just learning to recognize the capability and capacity of every person sooner than later. So let's go into high quality teaching. And the main thing here is it's impactful. And now what is impact? It's essentially a level of weight behind something. If you look at a very impactful punch, it's something that moves you, or it hurts, it has damage. And now the beautiful thing with high quality teaching is it's beneficial. That impact is massive. Like if you think back to some of these teachers, I'm sure that they had a massive role in your development, even if it's just a tiny moment. Because even really, really bad teachers or poor quality education can still lead to a high quality teaching moment. And the truth is, these moments are magic. The individual moments where it's like, aha, there's so much that you can take from that by being in an internally sound environment for yourself and allowing it to bounce off, to echo within you so that you can kind of be like, oh wow, what is that? And the more that you do that, the more you'll find that there's natural engagement that comes with that and to that. Because when things are aha, it's like they've come into focus. And the trick there is knowing that that focus can just keep focusing, no matter what it looks like, because it's focused. It will naturally be able to focus on other things. And that's ultimately what high quality teaching is. It's direct. Now, the engaging lessons that we're speaking about are to say, okay, Tabo and Johnny, we're back on them. Okay, so we need to go ahead and let's say it's a class of mostly of individuals that for some reason, all of them like cars. So you know that having cars as a central theme every now and then is a beneficial topic. Maybe that all their parents are in a club or whatever it is. Now, the trick there is to know what type of cars they know. So let's say they like trucks, but you made yours about sports cars. It's not going to really land as much. From there, it's then learning how to recognize what the individuals took from that. So let's say that one of the students was really interested in all the different colors of the cars, and they were very interested in learning more about that, and even the different painting techniques and a lot of different stuff. It's a case of learning to say, even if that's not the entire focus of it, it's learning how to craft your communication with them so that it's saying that, hey, let's say Johnny, I see that you're really interested in all these colors and I love seeing that and it's super, super interesting, and it's definitely worth looking into. But for now, we're going to need to focus on the different types, rather than the different colors that are on those types, so that we're staying focused on it. Because let's say at the end, they're going to need to look at different classifications of topics, shall we say. It's a bit thin an example, I know, but bear with me. But the point of it is that continuous assessment needs to occur continuously. Now, the trick here with continuous assessment is, while you can let the kids know, or the individuals know, it's more important for you to know. So you need to know your classroom for the purpose of knowing how each individual is developing, so that you can cater to those individuals as individuals. So if you know that there are 2 students that are really, really struggling, it is somewhat more beneficial for you to go ahead and focus your attention there, not to not engage with anyone else. And the balance there is also to let others know that you are still focused on them, but you don't feel that they require the attention now. Because a classroom that is all growing together and is ultimately being used for a group dynamic is more important than an individual within one class doing well. Everyone grows together, so everyone should be able to work together. And that's where group work and things like that come in. The 5 components are as follows. Qualifications. These are speaking about best practices and the agreed upon qualification for that. The content is then tailored to the student, the individuals, and what it is that they use and have available to interact with. What's weird, research is finding that lots of different forms of content and visual aids, like PowerPoints and engagement mechanisms, and specifically things like participation, are finding a lot of benefits for most people. There's also things like play to integrate and incorporate. And now the trick there is to make sure that you are still remaining on topic and integrating with it. Integrating means that you're actually interacting around the main piece of information. Assessment we went through, but it's basically just to make sure that what your goal with the student that you have is being reached or moved towards. This is obviously able to be adapted and changed over time, but as long as you keep moving towards them and checking in and ensuring that where you think they are is where they are, that's where the assessment is very important, is knowing that you're not just thinking it, but you're also checking in to make sure that that's where they actually are. Development is then speaking about the teachers themselves and developing and integrating their own practice. So it's essentially the difference between learning about different concepts, like qualification or something like that, and then, for example, like this video, applying them. A key there is to kind of ask, it's again going back to that art and science, and you can see and use that to check in with where you are. But the first thing I would really recommend is try to teach people to think. Try to teach things that you are learning to people. And there's an interesting balance, because there's a certain degree of wanting to first teach it yourself to understand what you're learning, and then to go ahead and start teaching it to others as well. And to understand that you're not going to be perfect the first time, and that's okay. But it's far more important to start and to continue moving forward than to be perfect right from the beginning. Well, let me just get that presentation. Okay, let me just double check that's still going. Good. Okay, so then teaching aids. So teaching aids are, as we said, different forms of content. So that's where it's that, like graphs. Not graphs. Diagrams. Diagrams are amazing. I should have told you I put a diagram now. But it's like this is now just again that piece of what's the word? Taking information back and being like, okay, that's what I can do in future, and I can look at what it is that they do. But here, it would be somewhere along the lines of illustrating how all of these work together. And I've got a quote here. Those are two. A great teacher tailors their instruction to fit each student like a well-made suit, ensuring every individual receives the support they need to reach their full potential. So that's speaking about the unique journey. And the trick there is, and this is where teachers really are artists, because if you think that you have a class of 20, 30, 40, 50 students, you've got all of these people that all learn differently, all have different experiences, and you're needing to tailor them each a suit to different specifications daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. So it's a case of learning how to do that. And that's also where the artistry of it really comes in, because you can't really know how to do it because every moment is so different and unique. But practicing what you can do and then having a certain amount of wiggle room for the rest is really, really important in moving forward. And then experience. One often hears is the best teacher, but that it's only true if you reflect on it and extract its lessons. And that's again back to high quality teaching or learning really, is any experience you have, the more that you're able to reflect on it. And now reflection is a very interesting one because it comes down to more than just what do I remember. It's what do I remember and how does that, like, what does that mean to me? So it can be, we look back at high quality teaching, just from one slide back, if there's a case of there's assessment again, and that assessment is something that teachers integrates with each person differently. But it's only by learning how to work with the practice that you actually practice. Because you can get assessed 20 times a day, but unless you're going to go ahead and say, okay, what does that mean to me? What can I do? And what's the practical next step in order to do it? 3 examples of quality learning interaction. So now this is a really interesting one. I really enjoyed going through this because it's a case of what is learning in a sense, and how do you interact in a way that promotes it. And you can see it's relevant. It's when people are engaging. And engagement is something where it's a choice, to be honest with you. You can either engage with something or you cannot. And the trick here is that it can be, engagement isn't always easy, and sometimes the people you engage with are very difficult. I'm sure we've dealt with some really difficult people. I know I've been a really difficult person at times. And the trick there is to know that, you know what, I'm going to still engage with it because at this point I'm showing up for me. And if that changes, if I need to not show up right here in this instance, then that's okay. And in that way, that ultimately decision comes from a level of insight into that subject and not being almost afraid of it. It's not being in lack thereof. It's in gain for, in that regard. And this is also where the more that you apply your knowledge in your daily life, it ultimately turns into wisdom. And that's one of the biggest things, is knowing something is first thing. But the true change comes when you learn how to apply it artfully. I know, it's been repeated a lot, but it really is a sense of, and that's where it's also degrees of intuition that you're ultimately using, and learning how to listen to that intuition. And another great example, so there are more in the Human Hands-on Training AST Level 2 guidebook by someone and Berger, I'm pretty sure, but good book, nice stuff. And it says how learners are able to complete the activities in the group as well as on their own at home. And this then obviously speaks about the concept of autonomy, of learning to be able to do it on your own, for yourself. If you're not doing it for yourself, you're just doing it for the assignment, that's okay. You know what? At least you're doing it. If you're not doing either of that, and you're somewhat hearing my voice, do it now. It's better to start now. But autonomy is a really, really powerful and useful thing to develop in your life, because there's only ever going to be you. You might have other people around you, you might have friends, you might have partners, you might have children, whatever it is. At the end of the day, it's just you. You can't really rely on that person to always be able to do the thing for you. They might be a great help, they might be amazing, but you can ultimately develop an autonomous life. And it's not about a big scary or a big bad, because I know I hear a lot of people speak to me about this or speak about it, and it can sometimes be fear-based. It's actually about knowing I am capable. And this is where it is that it's just about engaging with the information and trusting the process that you're doing. And knowing that all the moreness that you think you have to do in order to survive probably isn't 100% required, because you probably haven't repeated that every other moment in your life. And if you have, then maybe you're not doing the right thing, to be honest, because there are certain points where things aren't meant to be easy, but they're meant to move forward. And that's the whole point of learning interaction, is you're not meant to start from your weaknesses, you're meant to start from your strengths so that you can use those to help your weaknesses along. And that's what I mean there, is use what you are good at to help you learn the other skills, because you can learn all the skills, but you can't do it from a broken foot, And then, obviously, a great quote from Mr. Mandela: "Education is the most powerful weapon with which you can choose to change the world." Which you can use to change the world. Yeah. Now, the main goal here is learners develop self-reliance to be independent and competent. That's the main goal of a quality learning interaction. Okay, so now, another wonderful thing is, what are your teaching beliefs? And this is also, write down, take a moment to look at your current beliefs, your evolving views, and your future practices. Take about 5 minutes, do it now. Cool, so, you've got some current beliefs. You've got what it is that you believe about it. It might be teachers need to be strict, or they need to speak all the time, or they can't look like this, or they need to be this age, or whatever it is. And the evolving views can be things that you're slightly aware of might be doing, like teachers can be anyone. Anyone can be a teacher. Or the best teachers will be those keeping up to date with trends, or that have some experience. And then future practices of what it is that we are going to do, like what we're currently doing. And in South Africa, it's very interesting because obviously we live in quite a space where there's not always all the access to technology and equipment and all of that is what there is in the rest of the world, or that the world itself has to offer. And this is very much based in future practices, where there are a lot of opportunities, specifically for teaching and learning, that are still coming to light. And it's a case of, for you as teachers, to remain abreast with them as much as you can. I know there's this wonderful thing, which is 2 weeks. Don't underestimate what 2 weeks of focused attention can do to change your whole life. And they were speaking specifically about catching up on work you're behind on. But 2 weeks, they said 2 weeks. 2 weeks of just focusing and really showing up to learn and catch up, you can do so much more than what you would otherwise believe possible. So now, within this, how do these beliefs show up in your daily life? Now, this is why I want you to take it down, because take this down, put it somewhere safe. You can even write a letter to yourself, and put it somewhere for a year. And if you're really impatient, you can do it shorter. You can do a month, okay? A month's actually a really good idea. Do a month. And then in a month's time, come back and reflect. Before you read it, write down another: current beliefs, evolving views, future practices. And then read both of them. And then put both of them in there. Keep doing that. And then just start looking at how your current beliefs and evolving views and future practices are slowly changing. Look, you can ultimately do, for extra credit, go ahead and do a third one. Okay, so you can either, let's say you could do 12 of these. You can do as many, but once you have 2 or more, you can then write a third one speaking about how your beliefs have shifted, your evolving views have changed, and your future practices now look. And from there, you can kind of see your trajectory as a teacher. And that can be a really, really good way for you to start looking at what it is that you are doing and moving towards. Because once you have a trajectory on your teaching beliefs, you can kind of see, oh, this is the type of teacher that I might be. And then you can decide, because you have that opportunity, do I want to be that like that? Is that how I want to be? And if it's a yes, awesome. If it's a no, what do I want to change? What is my viewpoint around that that I would like to focus on evolving? And what's the future practice that I can do to do that? And what you'll see is you kind of have a bit of a shaping directive here, because you have the opportunity now to change the way that you see yourself. Again, this brings us into, because what you have right there is a certain degree of you participating with yourself. And this brings us to participative learning. Really, really wonderful work. It involves active engagement with content through discussions and group work. And you'll see a lot of your teachers have probably tried to do this. But the trick here is that it's very much required, it depends on the learners as well. Because in order for it to really work, the learners need to engage actively. Now, what is active engagement? Because it's a bit of it's thrown in there, but it's quite important. Active engagement is I'm taking this in, and just like I read, it involves active engagement with content. I then look at, okay, what can we look at here further? So here's a node, here's a piece of information, participative learning, and then there's the active engagement within that, a small little box, and then you unpack that box. And the active engagement is the unpacking of the box. It's looking at what it is and seeing how it connects together and saying, okay, that's actively engaging with something. Ah, I know more. Now, how can I actively engage with the rest of it? So, let's look at the slide. Theoretical background. It exists in learners being confident, independent learners, and teaching acting as mediators for learning. So you see here, as opposed to some of the traditional approaches that our parents would have gone through, the teachers now are mediators as opposed to authoritarians. And that's just to say, where the teacher used to say, be quiet, listen to me, which still happens, don't get me wrong, don't hate your teachers just for that. A lot of the time they do know a lot of what's happening on. But once they've given you some of the tools and things like that, it's then for you as independent learners to take them on and to ask the right questions. And now this obviously brings the point of, if you're not asking questions or paying attention, and now a question also, to go back to the quality learning environment, quality learning itself, is saying that the questions need to have insight. So a lot of the times, in some of the learning spaces I'm in, it's a case of knowing to listen for long enough and to take notes and to engage with things to have a certain degree of depth, which is just to say, I see what we're learning to a degree, and this is what I can do about it. This is how I can integrate it or work with it or show up for it. Now, the root of the word education is educere. I always thought it was educare, but this is obviously the way it was spelled in Latin days, I assume. Anyway, literally to lead forth or to bring out something which is potentially present, by Eric Fromm. So the trick there is saying that the learning that you're looking to learn, what you have awakened truly, is already within you. And the educator is just about bringing that out from within. It's just coaxing it, it's just allowing it to naturally show itself out. And that's where we're all working together. And I want you to look at your environment and the people around you and see that all of them have this ability to learn. I mean, no one is special that we are incapable of learning. Even barring maybe a handful, in the world, because of brain development and things like that. But even then, not actually, because now we have a neuroplastic model of looking at the brain, which is saying that it does change. So truly, everyone is capable of learning if they apply themselves to it. And that's the thing is, it's not about looking to any one group, but about all groups. And knowing that what you can start doing today has a knock-on effect in your life, in the lives of others. And when you teach someone something, you don't know, or share something with someone, you don't know what it is that they might come back and share with you. And that's where it's really, really spectacular. Okay, so the keys within this are discussion, group work, and collaboration. Now, you can ask yourself, why discussion? You can think about it and saying, well, if I can only speak from my point of view, but I then allow myself to listen to someone else and discuss with them, Those are 2 points of view present, at least, assuming there aren't more people. And just between those 2 points of view, there's then a third point of view between what they're both saying to one another. Between what your viewpoint and their viewpoint, like what the middle of it is and how you can listen to both of those. It goes back and forth. And the more you discuss, the more information you get. It's really, really useful. Group work is when you're then doing that same thing just about, but now there's an intention. There's a something that's being built. And just like that, it's the different pieces of a puzzle slowly working together to create more. Collaboration can be that you don't even need to work on the same project, but you're able to help one another, and that's really useful, because sometimes what you know, someone else might know, but they might know something you don't know. And if you're all working together, it's much, much easier. Okay, almost there. Theory of participative learning. Okay, so let me just quickly check. Okay, yeah. So what I really love here, okay, cool. So here we have people learn by engaging with what they're learning, by being engaged with it. And then here we have an example of it. It's a really nice one. I was quite happy with myself. Is this question an example of engaging? Now the truth is this question an example of engaging is only an example of an engaging question if you engage with it. So you can also judge how engaging it is, because if you just say no, it's about as engaging as much engagement as got, but it's no, because it hasn't really asked me to explain, and as a result of it not asking me to explain, it's only very surface level. People learn by building onto existing learnings, and this is also with your option, as we see there, of seeing it as a puzzle and bringing more pieces to it. People learn by exploration. What is something you haven't thought of before? And this is open-ended, because you have to first think of something you have thought of, and then haven't thought of, which is kind of impossible because you haven't thought of it before. So how do you start? So it's kind of just like drawing a net and hoping you catch something. Requirements for participative learning. What environment is needed to most inspire participative learning? What teaching styles inspire participative learning? Give 2 examples of perfect conditions for participative learning. Now the trick here is to look at where it is that you have most learned with others. Because if you spend the time and place learning with others, and I'm sure everyone has, you just have to be a bit creative with when it's happening. You can start piecing these together to it. And now, I want to challenge you to say that even if you might not think you have, just spend a little bit of time working on it, of asking where it is that I've been able to participate just with myself, even, just through learning through my own motion and experience. Because I can tell you, every moment you're learning, your brain's taking a piece of information, it's putting together, and it's ultimately doing it so that you can learn. We are built to survive. We survive by learning from what it is that we've done and continue to do. Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's needs, but not every man's greed. So ask yourself what it is that you're working for today and what it leads to tomorrow. The teacher personality traits for a participative teacher. So the more of these you develop within yourself, the closer you are to the ideal participative teacher. The trick here is that having these traits naturally makes you more likely to be able to be a good participative teacher. After all, I'm not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. And as you choose to become and focus on it, you do. So these are built in, you'll have the characteristic trait, so develop what is good, and then you have a question of what is good in this. And now these action questions are built so that you can ultimately, through asking them and contemplating on them, contemplating is sitting with them and like allowing them to sit through you. And as you do that, the words resonate to kind of build and create that echo of learning. And you'll find that it begins to activate, shall we say. Tactful. How can I highlight the good in this? And that's the case there. What is it you're wanting to focus on? Sensitive and understanding. Where can I meet this person in their feeling? Their feeling. Where are they feeling and how can I serve that? And what angle is best to serve it from? So if someone just bruised their foot, don't push on the bruise. If you're assessing it to make sure that it's not broken, and and you have first aid understanding, then you might like need to press on it slightly, but it's a case of knowing what's the right dynamic. Patient, what can I do to help them? Authoritative, what can I change? And this is important because it's, as opposed to needing to speak loudly or be the loudest or most obnoxious, whatever it is, it's about creating an environment that is naturally you're going to be the one followed. And the trick there is because you are the teacher, you do have touches of, the keys to the car, so to speak. But only if others see and value you in that way. And that comes down to valuing yourself in that way. And from doing that, knowing what your boundaries are for the class, and what others' boundaries are as well. So if you have different faiths present or different cultures present, there's a certain element of needing to work with all of them, but also knowing that you're creating a cross-cultural space. So you are the ones able to, assuming you're not breaking any massive boundaries or things like that, and if they are, then they need to be discussed and brought nicely, because even if you as the educator are doing that, you're not meaning to. So it's just a case of everyone's working together, organized. What helps me? How can I set everything up that I have all the situations I need, the learning materials, all of these different pieces in the pot. Clear? Who is this for? How can I better frame it for them? And observe it. Who is this learner? So that you make sure that it can learn. And then life is like a camera. Focus on what's important. Capture the good times. And if things don't work out, just take another shot. Okay, here we have the 7 roles of a teacher, finally. So we have scholar, researcher, and lifelong learner. So this is being completely present in your own practice. Curriculum designers, you'll be the person designing how it is that it gets learned. And this is why it's important to know your students and who your target market, so to speak, is. Assessor, as you are naturally always in assessment of them to make sure that they are on track. Mediator for their learning and for any disputes that may arise. Expert, as your expertise is what's valued. Community and pastoral care. So this says that you are there for their well-being. You're a part of their learning journey and the way that they grow and learn. Administrator and manager, as you are the admin and manager of your classroom. So you make sure that things are flowing and meeting deadlines and all these wonderful things. And, a trick here is you're not going to be good at all of them. But you can get good at all of them. And you can use your strengths as a curriculum designer, to go ahead and help with your administrator and manager, where it is that you make it that you design worksheets and things like that don't require much marking. You can do it that you use group work for as many things as possible, or oral spoken things, or whatever it is. So, you can create it that your job is easier on the parts that you're not good at. This is also a way of working with other teachers and facilitators is very, very helpful in terms of working with your fellow educators and educators so that you guys can all work together, because teamwork really does make the dream work, and a burden shared is a burden halved. Key takeaways. Okay, so teaching is both an art and a science. Dynamic shaped learning. So the more that we are able to create a dynamic environment that's rich for every person, the more there is that each person is able to learn. Having these learned experiences then anchor in and be participated in by other learners helps them convey that learning to others in a more active and ready motion. This works with your dynamics as you understand better, more about your students, and your students understand more about things. For example, if you have 2 people share their learnings, it helps give others their perspective and ways of working with those learnings. Here are some, you wouldn't really need to look to read any of these, don't worry about it. But the main thing is really just engage, to be honest with you. The number one thing with this is to look at the environments you're in as potential learning environments and teaching environments. And the biggest trick to do that is not to see yourself as a teacher or others as learners, but to see yourself as both and others as both. And to recognize that any moment and every moment you are learning something and you are teaching something. So be excited because the whole world is available to you and it's only just begun. And there really are such incredible opportunities present in every moment, in every way. And that's magic.